Yes.
So
Exactly.
that got me off guard. Somewhere in my 30s, I was like, oh no, do I actually want to go down this path? Because I wasn't prepared for it.
So the insatiable drive to have kids in my 30s, it was insane. It was so overtaking, all encompassing. And before that, I didn't even want kids. I didn't think I wanted kids when I was younger.
Do you know why you didn't want kids?
I don't know. I mean, I had a great mom. She was a single mom, and she talked all about all the time, like how it was, a bit stressful and such. And I would see that maybe that impacted it. We were in a low socioeconomic family because it was a single, she was single, but she was the teacher. Later, she did very well. It was more just that she raised us in our earlier years, and then she was doing babysitting and that kind of stuff. So maybe I just saw the financial stress. So like instinctually as a little girl, and then as a young woman, maybe I had it wired in me that I worried about safety and security, and to have kids, that meant that I had to provide. And, what if I don't find the right partner? And it wasn't until I found the right partner that I said, oh, I'll have kids. Okay, I could do this. And then it was still delayed. And because then my focus was on my practice. It was building my practice, and my brother was having kids. And so I was like, oh, well, somebody has to show up to work, and we were working together, my brother and I at the time. He owned the business, so I was working as their main naturopathic doctor. So I thought, okay, you know what, maybe I'll just delay. And then in my 30s, when I got my diagnosis of polycystic ovary syndrome a little late in the game, because I wasn't the classic picture, it was insatiable. The drive to have kids was nuts. Like my whole life was revolved around, starting this family. I was probably pretty, my spouse probably was like, what's wrong with you? But, and 3 years in of natural trying, right, it becomes cumbersome too.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So part of it is like, you want what you don't have, I suppose. Yes. You mentioned that before. And, and then once you get the first chemical pregnancy or miscarriage, then you want it even more because now.
Yes. Well, and so I actually want to bring this up. And in practice, so for myself, I had actually always envisioned myself having kids, like at least 2, maybe 3. But then, I actually had a fertility challenge. And I think that you're right. When we have challenges, it kind of ups the level of what you want, right? It's like you want what you can't have. And what I've seen in practice too, there's lots of women that will tell me, gosh, Mary, I never wanted kids. And now I'm in the place where I'm dying to have kids. And there are 3 motivating factors. I found this in research. And one is, when you all of a sudden hit that age, like that magic age of like 39 or 40, then there's this contemplation. Oh my gosh, it's now or never. And then it becomes now. And then that insatiable desire is there. The second piece you had already mentioned, you find a right partner, and then you start envisioning, oh, wow, it might be nice to have a partner and have a family together. And then the third you also mentioned, and you actually experienced, I believe, as well, when you get pregnant. Oh, in your case, you were attempting to get pregnant, but in some cases, it's women that didn't want to get pregnant, but they got pregnant and then they miscarried. And then that drive to want to have that baby is like, bam, right? And one of the ways I think of that is you surrender to the pregnancy. It's like, okay, fine, now I'll have a kid. And then you envision this life. And when you envision this life and all of a sudden, bam, you have the rug pulled from underneath you and you miscarry, then again, it brings that drive. So that's one way of looking at it. But the second piece is you literally have hormones that are going out of its tree while you're pregnant. So stimulating that, it kind of like gets that juice rolling so that drive is there. And the reason why I think it's so important for us to speak to this, Tanya, is that, a lot of people listening to the podcast may be those that are trying to conceive. And, but what it will be also great is to actually capture the women that are saying, you know what, I don't think I ever want kids. And so if you're in that group, you actually have no idea. because you may change your mind down the road.
You may. Yeah.
Not all the time, but you may.
And that's okay. I mean, I changed my mind in my 30s and meeting the right partner. But I also think a life without kids.
Yes.
Okay, kids, if you ever listen to this episode, don't kill me for saying this, but it's okay. Like, I mean, I could, had I not, I think, obviously when you go through a fertility journey, it makes it harder because then you're not getting what you're wanting. But if you literally make an intentional decision, you just don't want kids and you skip the fertility journey part, I think that would be okay. Right?
Well, it's more than okay. It's more than okay.
Like,
what I'm saying,
thinking myself, like, backwards, like rolling backwards. If I chose, you know what, that's okay. I just don't want kids. I can have a life without kids. I'm going to travel. I'm going to put all my energy into my relationship and my work. And
yes.
I think it's wonderful options, like not everybody has to have kids. It's okay. Like there's a societal pressure though, that everyone has to. So that's why I bring it up,
Well, I think that's changing somewhat though, right? Because I think the younger generation where there's such stress on the environment and, being responsible, I think there's a shift. But so that's why I'm saying for the people in that camp, then don't feel bad and wrong when you actually, maybe flip that switch and say, oh gosh, maybe I do want kids, right? Because then there's guilt around that of wanting children. Right. There's listen, we're like guilt ridden as humans for something.
I know, right? Guilt ridden moms.
Yeah. Right. Whether you want a baby, when you want a baby or not, like, it's like, oh my gosh, you have guilt, like guilt for wanting it, guilt for not wanting it.
Totally. One way to look at it is, this is funny. So my friend Ron said to me the other day, he's like, when you're dead, 20 years later, who's thinking about you and the decisions you made? Like, anyone? And I'm like, no. So it's like, don't think too hard. Like, just, make a decision that makes the most sense for you in the moment. And then also what's helpful is to evaluate certain things that doctors don't tell you about, like AMH. Like, what if you're in your 20s and you're kind of, you're undecided?
Yes.
And you want to know, what's your ovary reserve like? And if it's really low, then that might make you, and you're kind of teetering on the side of maybe I'll have kids, then maybe you change your mind and you make the decision to have kids, at an earlier age, rather than waiting until you're 40 and discovering it's not possible. Or in that case, you just know in your mind, you have to have potentially other options. Like, one day you might need to get an egg donor, and that's okay if you've delayed. Right. So like uncovering it earlier, in my opinion, I would have loved to have known my AMH earlier to know I had PCOS.
Right. I think that's a very smart move because, again, based on your life in the moment, you actually don't know. I mean, haven't you done that? Well, you already said you did. Like, you'll make decisions and you think it's finite. Mm-hmm. And then things happen and all of a sudden your world opens up a bit and then you change your mind. So for me, for example, I told you that I wanted kids and I knew that. And I had always envisioned that it was going to be completely natural. And when I found out I had blocked fallopian tubes that were irreversible, and then in the end, I had to get my tubes taken out surgically, meaning there was no way in heck I could get pregnant naturally. I changed my tune. So instead of saying, all right, fine, like, because otherwise it'd be like, it's natural or nothing.
Yeah.
And that would have been already the deciding factor. It would have been nothing. So in that moment, I'm like, really, is that so for me? And I didn't realize that. I would say, okay, fine, I'll surrender to IVF, right? It's like, okay, fine. Yeah. And then coming at it from a different perspective and saying, what an opportunity. I love science anyway. So what the heck? I'm going to be be my own science experiment.
That was exactly, because I was kind of anti-IVF for those 3 years.
Yes.
No way I'm doing any kind of medical procedures to conceive a baby. But then I realized over time, I'm like, well, I think I need help, and it's science is amazing. So I'm so grateful for IVF.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I think it's the best thing ever.
Right. And so you just don't know. We don't know. And like here, my little 10-year-old, she knows that her whole little life, she knows that I had issues. Then we had blocked fallopian tubes. Oh, he calls it. Right. And so in her perspective, she's like, Mommy, I don't want to have kids. And I think she's also watched too many videos and she's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to like does that baby come out of that vagina?
Aww.
And so she's like terrified. She's like, I'm not having a baby. I'm going to adopt. Right. So that's her reality right now. And that might change. That might stay the same, but it may not. Like, we don't know. So the whole point is like, we're going to be in the present moment, decide where you are right now, but also keep an open mind. And I want to speak to that because I had the opportunity to interview Jillian Michaels. And for those of you who don't know who she was this big superstar when this TV show came out. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but
I did. I was obsessed with it. I loved it.
Okay. So it's called The Biggest Loser. The Biggest Loser. The Biggest Loser, right? And she became this crazy fitness health mogul, nutrition, right? Like very well known, fitness buff, and she has an app now. But I love this woman, and I only knew about her because a patient of mine who was trying to conceive was telling me she was doing her video. So I looked it up when I was doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this woman. Yeah. So to have this opportunity to interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, so great. And the reason why I bring this whole discussion up about babies is because for her, and you'll listen to this or watch this if you want to watch.
I did already.
Oh yeah.
You were so smooth. I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not like a big, like I don't get anxious with the idea of interviewing celebrities, but because I watched all of her shows and thought she was so amazing, I thought, oh my gosh, Mary's doing great. She's so smooth. But then meanwhile, you haven't seen it. You're so cute.
Oh, thank you. Well, I had like a bunch of questions. Oh, thank you. Well, I had like specific questions and it completely went out the window because she's such an amazing, phenomenal speaker. Like she just led the way and I'm like, okay, I'll just follow you, whatever. But the point is with hers that she says it in her interview that she never thought she would have kids. Like it wasn't in the cards for her. She was in the same sex relationship. But what's interesting is that she was in the no camp and then her partner really wanted a baby. So she wanted to be supportive for her partner. So that's great, Right. And then what opened up her heart and mind was in her 30s, she went to Africa. At an orphanage in Africa. So you'll hear about that in a sec. So, tune in for sure for this because I love the conversation with her. And she even spoke to about how acupuncture was the savings grace. So I love that. And I did not prompt her at all.
I know. I loved how she was like, I have no idea how it works, but it works. Traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture is amazing. I loved hearing that because sometimes we do have to trust our healthcare practitioners, whether or not you're getting medications or acupuncture, lifestyle changes. Sometimes there comes a place where we have to kind of let go of Dr. Google and just trust, right? Like that, even going through my own fertility journey, I was like, okay, you know what? Stop looking at numbers, just trust. And I think as long as you have good healthcare practitioners, something I found fascinating she didn't bring up is that she herself has polycystic ovary syndrome. Did you know that?
She didn't bring it up there. Yes.
Okay.
But I think maybe off camera, I think she mentioned it, but she wrote a book about making babies. I'm like, that's great. And it's because of her partner, because her partner discovered health issues with regards to reproduction or reproductive health. So that's awesome. And so check that out. I don't want to give everything away for Pete's sakes. But one thing I will comment on, she mentioned about how her partner went to the doctor and she had some aortic thing like overflow. And she says, oh, it must be the acupuncture. And I'm like, I actually don't know if that's really just
that's
so you guys
I was
know.
Thinking too while I was watching. I agree with you. Yeah.
It was like a little alarming. Like, no, you don't blame that on the acupuncture.
No. I think some people, I actually have a very predominant abdominal aorta. And I think it's just depends on your musculature and your abs, like how much that the artery kind of bounds out of your abdomen.
Yes.
So if it is her wife or partner, is she really fit?
Well, she was extremely fit. So I think that was the issue.
That's why. Yeah.
That's why. Sure. But I didn't want to say anything because, it's Jillian Michaels. So
of course. Yeah. But
anyway, check it out. So honored to have you here. And I know that for a lot of people, when they're trying to conceive, they think it's easy. It's going to happen so easily.
Do people think that?
100%.
Wow. I don't know if it's because I'm older. My friends don't think that.
Well,
you're dealing with people who think...
I'm older than you, just saying.
Really?
Yes, I am.
Oh my
But
You look fantastic.
it's the acupuncture.
Yeah, girl. Wow.
Thank you. But it is the truth. And if you're a celeb or anyone with status, it's like, oh, surely it'll be easy for you. And people actually trying to conceive typically will say, when they're young, they're thinking that they're trying to not get pregnant. But then when they're wanting to conceive, it's like,
Harder.
oh my God, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I wrote an entire book on this. I didn't know anyone thought it was easy.
So interesting. Maybe it's where you live. And
Maybe.
the patients I see are the opposite of that. But okay, so
Wow.
speaking of which then,
Yeah.
so when it comes to trying to conceive and it's like, okay, well, it's so hard, then maybe you should just try adoption, right? And so with the adoption piece, because I know you have a lovely little girl, not so little anymore.
I didn't even try to conceive though. It wasn't a goal of mine personally. My ex wanted to be pregnant and to make a child, and I was like, cool. For me personally though, I wanted to adopt, so we ended up doing both.
Did you know right from the get-go that you wanted to adopt?
I didn't know that I wanted kids.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that got me off guard. Somewhere in my 30s, I was like, oh no, do I actually want to go down this path? Because I wasn't prepared for it. And I had started working with kids on a job, and I guess I just got a little older, and I ended up by accident at an orphanage in Africa, which is a really long story. And I just thought, all right, if I decided to go down this path, I personally don't need to make a new human. I think like you're called to do it or you're not, right? For me, I wasn't. I thought, if I'm going to do this, what can I offer? And to be fair, citizenship to America is kind of a decent gift to give a kid. So I was like, I could be a mom. I could take a kid from a place where they really don't have much of a chance and give them a chance. And that was really important to me. And so I was called to adoption, and my ex wasn't, and now I have two kids. They're both adopted to me.
Sure.
But my ex did go through the fertility thing with our son, absolutely, which is why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
Based off everything she ended up going through, I was like, how's nobody talking about this? It's kind of a big deal. And she saw an acupuncture specialist.
That's great.
And I'm convinced him and his herbs are what did the trick for her. It's fascinating.
Well, but knowing that there are challenges, so whether a woman goes in or not, straight or in a same-sex relationship, in your case, there was an actual physical barrier. I mean, lack of sperm, that's a technical challenge, right?
Well, you could go by it.
Exactly.
Someone give it to you.
No, well, but you could say it so easily like that, but for some, it's a really difficult thing to wrap your head around. So
we did go through that. I wanted a friend of the family, and she didn't, and so there was that argument that we ended up having. But that part wasn't quite so challenging.
so then, what was the most challenging?
Here's where the advantage was, and this is something that I talk about in the book, is because we were a same-sex couple, you go to the doctor first, right? Okay, what do we need to do? How are we going to do this? Okay. And they did a checkup on her, and they were like, you have a lot of uterine polyps. So if we'd been a straight couple, we probably would have been trying for I don't know how long and wondering what was wrong. Whereas here they were like, we got to remove those before you even begin, so let's knock that out of the way.
Yes.
So that would have been something I'm sure would have gone on for at least a year. Like, this is strange. Why isn't this happening? So, I was like, you should go to the doctor and get your checkup and make sure everything's working.
100%.
Everything's in working order, so you don't waste time. Get your body healthy, prepare your body for pregnancy, nutrition and routine fitness and what have you. And then she was still struggling. So I was convinced, because she's a very petite person. I was like, I think you might just be a little underweight, babe. So I was making her literally ice cream sundaes every day for months. And we put a few pounds on her because she has this ridiculous metabolism that to this day I'm jealous of. And that didn't work. And then we went and saw an acupuncturist who was saying it was a blood flow issue.
Yes.
And he did herbs and acupuncture, and that worked. And I'm almost positive it was him. And when she got pregnant, oh my God, the woman at the fertility clinic, because she did IUI, right, artificial insemination. So you're still at the doctor. And the woman at the fertility clinic was like, you've got this bounding aorta. You need to go to the cardiologist. Something is wrong. You're like, you've got this, like this crazy. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, no, I don't think anything's wrong. I think it's our acupuncturist has her on these herbs. And he had sent so much blood flow. He had like, I don't know what the guy did. I don't fully understand it, but he had like dropped one of the ventricles down and like increased blood flow to the uterus. And he was the one that took her pulse 6 weeks in. He said, you're having a boy. She had a boy. And he was like, this is going to be a really big baby. And I kept saying, I'm like, I think you're going to need a C-section. And my ex, like I said, is very small. And she's like, no, she was hell-bent on natural childbirth. And I'm like, Heidi, I just don't think this is going to work out. I think you're going to need, and I couldn't believe that our OBGYN also was not like, I don't know, it looks like a pretty big 28 hours of labor, 2 weeks late, Pitocin drip, couldn't dilate, long story short, C-section after 28 hours. And he was 9 pounds. Exactly what our guy said. He's like, this is going to be a big baby, about 9 pounds. So I don't understand it because I obviously haven't trained in it. But I had a back injury and went straight to
Oh, that's awesome.
straight to an
Yes.
acupuncturist. Helped me with my shoulder. Had like slap tear on my shoulder, infraspinatus, supraspinatus dislocated. That's actually the same guy who fixed my shoulder, who's like, I actually specialize in fertility. And so like I said, I don't understand. I've had people try to explain it to me, but I don't care. It's like hocus pocus, but it works. It's fascinating.
Well, it's the
Fascinating
longest,
stuff.
Yeah, but it's the longest ongoing experiential science, meaning they document everything for
Incredible.
the past 3,000 years.
It's
right?
incredible. It really is. Oh, we're moving energy and we're doing this. I'm like, all right, whatever. It's fascinating stuff, though. And I'll let you talk about it. I mean, you know way better than me, but I am convinced that he's the one who got her pregnant.
Well, I mean, for sure what we know, and in science, there's now over 15,000 studies on acupuncture, and the majority initially was for pain of any kind. So it's a full system of medicine.
Right.
Right? But now we're getting more and more famous with regards to actually fertility.
Yeah.
Right? But I have so much more to ask, but I had no idea we were going to go so
I'm
wide.
so sorry. No,
It's okay,
that's
but
my
it's
fault.
lovely, and I'm just so grateful that you have your kids, and it's so awesome that at first you didn't even think maybe it's in the cards, but now you have two lovely humans that you take care of, right?
Oh, take care of.
Just getting started.
I joke around with them all the time too about that. I'm like, who knew this is going to be a full-time job? Like, I constantly give them a hard time about it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and they really do become your whole life. It just shifts completely. It's like, what's your long-term goal? And you used to think your long-term goal used to be, or mine used to be about me and accomplishing this. Now you
Yes.
realize you're just like this stepping stone to something greater than yourself.
Yes.
Which is them, and that's annoying. But I'm like, when did you become the priority? But no, you're absolutely right.
Well, and of course, when we look at women in business and then juggling to have a family, so, I mean, I don't even know how you incorporate everything that you do with the kids. It's amazing.
Help, lots of help, and not perfectly. It's Maria Shriver once said you can have it all, but not at the same time.
Exactly.
I say you can have it all, you just have to do it all a little bit shittier. It's like your business won't be perfect.
Yeah.
You won't be the perfect mom. But if there's a point where it's good enough. If it's good enough, I think that's as much as we can hope for these days.
Well, let me just ask one last thing then, because you're saying have help. Well, not everyone is in the position to have paid help. So
True.
what would you
True.
suggest as, what's your advice to people that are going through this? And
Family, friends, community. I mean, there's a reason they say it takes a village. So whether it's carpooling with other moms, like, okay, I'll pick the kids up from soccer Wednesday. Can you pick the kids up from soccer Friday?
yes.
It's like coordinating. I'll take on, this, if you take on that, seeing if you can recruit the grandparents, the aunts and the uncles. So, with my fiance, her sister lives here, and so it was like, okay, we'll take your kids on Saturday if you can take our kids on Friday. If you can trade off and find this balance with friends and family and community, that helps a lot.
Right. And then let's bring it back to the fertility piece, because that actually goes into that as well, because it can be time consuming. You had to run away to Haiti at last minute, right?
Yes.
It's like, oh my gosh, and then you have to abandon ship from work.
Yes. So, yeah, absolutely. It's a juggling act for sure.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for all you do.
Oh gosh, it's awesome. Thank you.
You're a badass.
How cool was that? Right? Just hearing the idea, similar to me, didn't want kids. And then she evolved and she made those, changes in her mind around she was going to have kids, and fully supported her partner in that drive. And I always find it so fascinating, and how, as you were saying, your daughter, right now she's young, she's 10, doesn't want kids. My 5-year-old is saying she does want kids. There's no fear on the idea that babies fly out of you like a butterfly. That's what I said.
Wow.
Because our kids were, they came quick, short labors. But yeah, I think that, even from a young age, you may or may not know. And even if you have a decision, it could change at any time. And regardless, it's really important. I think so important to have these discussions with your partner when you meet somebody that you want to share the rest of your life with, because there are those scenarios where you're coupled and, if the value isn't high in having kids, and then you get married, and then the person whose drive is so high and the other one's like, no, I don't want children, that could really destroy coupling. So it's really important to have those conversations, and then be supportive of what your partner wants, and not be like, oh, well, you want kids, then you raise them. It's like, you want them together, and you take care of each other primarily, and your kids, obviously, like, they're always a priority, but you have to take care of each other and each other's decisions to have or not have kids, and be strong in that. And I think it's so sweet that she was like, well, I didn't necessarily want them, but I'm going to, be there for my partner. And now she's got 2 kids. So,
yes. And full on partnership. Yeah.
So to hear her comment on her parenting, it's just like, it takes a lot. It's a lot out of her, which is totally normal. I think that even on this fertility journey, when you go on a fertility journey, sometimes you don't realize that the other end of it now is parenting for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yeah.
And you think
absolutely
that having kids, having kids is, or trying to make babies and have kids is hard. Well, parenting is a whole different level of difficult as well. And I think my struggles actually made me a better parent. I think that
yes.
if it was easy for me, I think I would have taken so much for granted. So that's another silver lining of mine. I actually, although I don't want to wish on anybody to have challenges, but for me as a person, maybe because of my evolution, like not wanting kids, then wanting them, and then really wanting them, yes. It actually helped me just every moment with my kids when, you're struggling and they're either yelling at you, or they're in pain, or they're sick, or, they're disgruntled, or they're, saying no, and you're saying yes. Like those moments, yeah. You're just like, okay, I can ground myself. And it doesn't mean that you can't complain about it, though. Like, you're allowed to complain when you're yes. struggling. Right. So it just makes you, I think, a better parent in some ways sometimes,
And so before we conclude this episode, I just want to add to it one thing. I'm very sensitive to those that are trying to conceive. And we know that Jillian Michaels had an easy time with it, and we're having it from her perspective. But she did allude to the fact that it was difficult for her partner. So it would have been interesting to hear what her partner would have to say, because Jillian's like, oh, yeah, it's easy to get sperm. And it's like, right. It could be quite a process, and it could be quite emotionally draining and charged. Right. So like, she just mentioned it like it was so easy. And I think she's such a positive force that she can just say it and like that. But I know deep down it was, tough. Right. And so I don't want to undermine what she says in your own experience when you're watching or viewing or listening to our episode here with Jillian, because your process is your process, and it can be quite grueling and challenging. But as Tanya mentions, it's like it can literally make you a better human being, a better future mom and parent. So I think that's how we'll conclude this. And so please share, share it with all your friends, because like, hey, it's Jillian.
So cool.
Yeah. So please, we look forward to seeing you guys real soon as we talk about Are You Tired next.